Hi, I'm Arlena. They said it was just a mix-up, that I wasn't really excluded from the European trip, but the group chat disappeared. My name vanished from the itinerary, and the bookings, all still on my credit card. I paid for the vacation, every flight, every hotel, only to find out I wasn't invited. Was it a mistake? Or have they always planned it this way? And what do you do when the people you love treat you like a bank, not a person? Let me tell you what happened after I hit cancel. I knew something was off the moment I walked into the hotel lounge. The space shimmered with quiet luxury, velvet chairs, a fireplace crackling in the corner, and tall windows framing Portland's early spring drizzle. We were meeting for a pre-vacation toast. Just the three of us. My mother, my sister Loris, and me. At least that's what the text said. Loris was already there, flipping her hair and laughing a bit too loud. Mom sat upright beside her, her smile too polished. A tray of champagne glasses rested on the low table in front of them. Tall, elegant, each etched with a name in delicate gold cursive. Larice picked one up. "Cheers to us!" she sang out. I stepped closer, looking for mine. But then I saw it. The glass with my name, Arlena, was already in her hand. I blinked. "Wait, that one's mine," I said, trying to keep it light. Larice tilted her head and squinted at the glass like she hadn't noticed. "Oh, really? Huh, I thought it said Loris." "It doesn't." She shrugged, lifted the glass to her lips, and took a sip anyway. "Sit, honey," Mom said quickly, motioning toward the chair opposite them. "We've already started." So I sat, in the one chair without a glass in front of it. Nobody offered to swap. No one laughed it off, no apologies. Just silence and the sound of clinking crystal. I sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap, swallowing every word I wanted to say. My throat was tight, but my voice, if I had chosen to use it, would have sounded too loud in that room. Instead, I smiled. They moved on. Talked about packing, about matching outfits for their Paris day trip, about how, this time next week, they'd be sipping wine in Saint-Germain. This time next week. The phrase sat in my chest like lead. Later that evening, we met again at Mom's place for dinner. Same faces, different stage. The dining table was set like a holiday feast, which felt strange considering it was just a Thursday. Mom had a way of turning casual meals into scenes out of a lifestyle magazine. As we ate, she pulled out a color-coded printout. "So here's the final itinerary for our little escape," she said. Larice helped with some of the adjustments. She laid it flat for us all to see. I leaned in. Venice, Rome, Barcelona, Paris. Each day packed with excursions, restaurant bookings, spa reservations, flight confirmations, hotel room pairings. Except, my name didn't appear. Not once. Not for the walking tour in Florence. Not for the dinner in Montmartre. Not even as a +1. "Is this the final version?" I asked, pretending not to choke on the dryness in my throat. "Oh," Mom said, as if seeing the paper for the first time. "Must be a mistake. I'm sure we meant to include you. Right, Larice?" Larice didn't even look up from her phone. "Sure." That was it. I nodded, smiled again, and excused myself early. On the drive back to my apartment, my mind ran like a broken metronome. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was probably just sloppy planning, that I'd bring it up tomorrow, once I'd cooled off. But deep down, I knew this wasn't random. I remembered every year I'd paid for Mother's hotel upgrades, every flight I booked under their names with my credit. I remembered quietly funding last summer's cabin retreat in Aspen when Larice's card declined at the last minute. They knew what they were doing. Back home, I kicked off my heels, sat on the edge of the couch, and opened my phone. There it was. Or wasn't. The group chat, Family Eurotrip 2024. Gone. No left the group notice, no farewell text. Just disappeared. I blinked, scrolled again, and then noticed a new chat thread in the list. Family Eurotrip 2024, with no trace of me in it. I wasn't removed. They created a new group without me. That stung. More than the missing glass. More than the itinerary. They didn't want to hear me protest. They didn't want to offer fake apologies. They didn't want to give me a chance to ask questions. They wanted me gone. Quietly, I opened my inbox and typed Europe into the search bar. Reservation after reservation popped up. Hotels, flights, dinner bookings, all originally made by me. Every one of them, still under my name. I stared at the screen, at the long thread of confirmations and receipts and automated thank you messages from booking platforms. Of course they'd wait until everything was booked. Of course they'd take, then remove. I closed the laptop slowly. The screen went black, and my reflection stared back. Calm, but no longer confused. I whispered to the silence. Maybe they didn't just forget. Maybe they finally got brave enough to say what they meant. For the first time, the idea of stepping away from all of it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like relief. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Mind quiet, but alert in that eerie way your body sometimes gets before your mind is caught up. I didn't bother with breakfast. I didn't light a candle. I didn't even open the blinds. I just walked straight into my home studio and turned on the monitor. My inbox was still open from the night before. Same list of reservations. Same fake gratitude from the travel sites. Then, almost on cue, a new email arrived, forwarded from Mom's address. No greeting. Just a PDF attachment titled Final Euro Plan Confirmed. I opened it. 3 pages. A hotel confirmation for a week-long European vacation. 3 rooms booked. My card listed as the payment method, but not one of those rooms had my name attached. Room 1. Velma, Queen Bed. Room 2. Loris, Deluxe Suite with Terrace. Room 3. TBD, may use for guest or storage. I stared at that line, guest or storage, and something inside me snapped so cleanly I almost heard it. They had turned me into an optional suitcase. I scrolled down. The day-by-day schedule followed, neatly formatted and color-coded. Breakfast times, drivers scheduled, museum tickets, everything mapped out down to the hour. But where my name should have been, in notes or confirmations, there was either nothing at all or the faintest ghost of my initials, scribbled out in pen. Like someone had printed the PDF, edited it by hand, scanned it again, and sent the new version. I zoomed in. There it was. A, crossed out in blue ink, slashed hard, like someone was tired of even pretending I mattered. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. It was something quieter, a deep kind of insult that didn't even bother to be loud. I sat back in my chair, arms folded. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. Later that day, I had coffee with Naomi at a small cafe we both liked, one of those places with mismatched mugs and soft jazz humming in the background. She was already seated when I arrived, 2 cappuccinos on the table, one topped with cinnamon the way I liked. "You okay?" she asked, scanning my face. I shrugged, forcing a casual tone. "Long morning." She hesitated, then leaned forward. "Look, I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but Velma stopped by the boutique yesterday. Said you weren't coming to Europe after all." I blinked. "She said that?" Naomi nodded, eyes flicking sideways. "She told us it was better that way, that you never really help on trips anyway." I didn't speak, she continued. "She said, you stress people out, that you make things harder." I reached for my cup and took a sip to keep from clenching my jaw. Did she say that in front of everyone? "No," Naomi said, voice softer. "She texted me after. I still have it." She unlocked her phone and scrolled, then turned the screen toward me. There it was. "Don't worry about Arlena. She's always dead weight on these things. Honestly, this trip will be smoother without her." Dead weight. I smiled. That kind of smile people mistake for calm when it's actually restraint. I handed the phone back to Naomi. "Thanks for telling me." "Are you going to say something to them?" Eventually, I said, finishing my drink, but not with words. When I got home that night, I lit a lamp and pulled out my personal budget tracker, color-coded, meticulous, and updated weekly. There it was. Every single charge. Flights, $1,980. Hotel deposits, $2,600 prepaid tours and dinner reservations, $1,980. Total, $6,260, all under my accounts, all pulled from my savings. I clicked on the tab name, Europe May 2024. Double-clicked. Renamed it, Final Payback? Then I printed it, all of it. Each transaction logged, each timestamp verified. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need a confrontation. I had receipts, literal ones. Sitting in front of my screen, I opened the payment dashboard linked to all my travel bookings. One button glowed softly in the top right corner. Cancel all. My cursor hovered over it. I didn't click, not yet, but I printed the transaction log and slid it into a blue folder labeled with my own handwriting. For when they ask. They always ask. Eventually. I tucked the folder into the bottom drawer of my desk, slid it shut, and leaned back in my chair. The quiet in the room wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that shows up when there's nothing left to argue with, not even yourself. I reached for my phone and opened my gallery, needing a mental break from numbers and receipts. I scrolled aimlessly through a sea of thumbnails, work photos, a few old selfies, snapshots of half-eaten pastries, and dusty fabric samples from client meetings. Then, without thinking, I tapped on an old album labeled Italy 2012. I hadn't looked at it in years. The thumbnails loaded slowly. The first one that caught my eye was of Loris, arms spread wide in front of the Colosseum, laughing, camera ready. I swiped again. She was twirling on a Venetian bridge, clutching a wine glass at a Tuscan villa, center stage at nearly every meal. Then I saw a group dinner photo. A long table, candlelight flickering off wine bottles. 3 birthday cakes were being carried out by servers. I remembered the moment, not because it was mine, but because it wasn't. That night had been my birthday too. We were born 2 years and 1 day apart. Growing up, Mom always said it made sense to celebrate together. 2 birds, 1 party. But by the time we were adults, only 1 bird ever got the party. In the photo, Loris was clapping and beaming, 3 cakes in front of her, each lit with candles spelling her name. I was at the edge of the frame, out of focus, holding her handbag and sunglasses. No cake, no candles, not even a glass raised in my direction. I remembered what Mom said that night when I asked if I should order dessert. "Don't be dramatic, Arlena. You're not a kid anymore." And yet, Loris had 3 cakes. I backed out of the album and locked the screen. That moment hadn't been unique. It had just been the first time I stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Later that evening, I found myself reorganizing my bookshelf when a small travel notebook fell out. It landed face up on the floor, and I instantly recognized the handwriting inside. My handwriting, from years ago. It was from our family trip to Santa Fe, when I was 14. The first few pages were filled with day plans, hotel confirmation numbers, restaurant reservations. My teenage self had charted out the entire schedule. How long it took to drive from the airport to the rental cabin, how many minutes we'd need to check in, the exact time we should leave for dinner to make the 7:15 reservation Mom insisted on. And for what? While I mapped out logistics, Loris had gone to get a new dress tailored, a gift from Mom, just because she deserved something nice. That day, when I handed Mom the itinerary, she looked at me and said, "You're just better with logistics, sweetheart. Loris's mind doesn't work that way." It sounded like a compliment, but it wasn't. It was code for, "You'll handle the boring stuff so she can shine." I remembered standing by the rental car with the keys in my hand, watching them walk into the restaurant while I checked the gas level and parked around the corner. That was the moment it began. Not the pain, but the pattern. They didn't treat me like a daughter. They treated me like an assistant who had somehow wandered into the family photo. I sat on the floor with the notebook in my lap, feeling something settle in me that wasn't anger, it was recognition. It was never just about this trip. It was the years stacked behind it. All the erased names, all the edited moments, all the roles I filled so they didn't have to. I slipped the notebook back onto the shelf and grabbed my keys. 15 minutes later, I was parked outside the gym. I didn't get out. I opened my phone and pulled up the voice memo app, and I started recording. "This is for me," I whispered. "Not for anyone else." My voice was even. "You're not imagining things. You've never been crazy. They've always done this. You just kept hoping one day they'd stop." I paused. "But here's the truth, Arlena. They won't stop. Because you've taught them that you'll survive it quietly. That you'll adjust. That you'll still show up." I took a long breath. "But that girl? The one who used to make excuses for them? She's not driving anymore." Then I hit delete. Didn't even listen to it. Just tapped the trash icon and let the silence return. They've played this script so many times. But next time, I won't be in it. I'll be holding the pen. Friday morning started like any other, until my phone buzzed with a voice message from Naomi. I was brushing my hair in front of the bathroom mirror, still in my robe, coffee untouched on the counter. I saw her name light up on the screen and thought maybe she was checking in about our lunch plans. We hadn't seen each other since her soft launch event 2 weeks back, where I helped her redesign the cafe's back patio. But the voice message was short, quiet, not friendly. "Hey, Arlena. I didn't know if I should say anything, but I overheard something last night at the store. Your mom was talking to a friend. I think she didn't know I was still behind the register. She said, and I'm quoting, 'It's fine. We used Arlena's name to get the group booking rate. She won't come anyway.'" I froze, brush mid-air, used my name. That phrase kept looping like a broken record. Not borrowed, not mentioned, not credited. Used. I set the brush down, walked to the kitchen, and sat on the bar stool like my legs had just given out. My phone was still in my hand, screen dimmed now, but Naomi's words echoed so loudly, they didn't need a replay. Used me to get a group discount. Without telling me. After excluding me. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling but controlled. I knew what I was looking for before the screen even finished loading. My inbox. The original reservation thread. I typed in the booking reference and hit search. There it was. A string of confirmations tied to my professional business account. Tour reservations, hotel suites, even the group transportation shuttle from Charles de Gaulle. All booked through Arlena Interiors, LLC, for discount verification purposes, I remembered Mom saying casually weeks ago. She'd forwarded the final itinerary to Larissa's email. She hadn't copied me. I opened the PDF attached to the email. It was a print layout of the master plan, flights, dates, lodging. Velma was listed as primary contact. My company's name was plastered across the top, watermark and all. If any balance went unpaid, it would hit my credit, not theirs. I sat still, eyes scanning the screen, heart steady. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't confused. I was documenting. Opening a fresh Google Doc, I titled it, "Trip Legal Liability Risk." I began copy-pasting screenshots, forwarded everything to a private folder, a breadcrumb trail they didn't know I could lay. And I wasn't finished, because Naomi's voice had triggered something else. A memory. 2 years ago. Aspen. Larisse had landed a short-term interior styling job at a boutique hotel. She'd posted about it nonstop on social media. So honored to bring a modern vision to this historic space. Clients and mutual friends praised her like she was a prodigy, but she hadn't pitched that client. I had. The hotel had reached out to me first. I was overbooked and recommended Larisse, even offering to review her proposal. I sent her examples, gave her access to 2 mood boards I'd used in Santa Barbara and Monterey. She thanked me with a single-word text. Noted. Later, Mom ran into the hotel manager at a charity gala and apparently took the credit. "That's the kind of creative drive I nurtured in Larisse," she had said. Nurtured. Like I hadn't been the one pushing Larisse into those opportunities her whole adult life. like I hadn't handed her my playbook and sat in the stands while she took the stage. I opened my archive of old design files, pulled up the hotel's public portfolio. There, 3 textile selections I had personally sourced and shared with Larice as inspiration, now featured in their lobby. Her name in the credits, mine nowhere. The insult wasn't new, but this time it felt engineered. I looked over at the clock. Almost 10 p.m. I turned off the lights in the living room, then walked into my study and flipped on the desk lamp, pulled the transaction folder from the drawer, and next to it started a new one. Label, proof, trip fraud. One by one, I downloaded every receipt, took screenshots of text messages, reservation codes, forwarded emails from months back. I even included my original pitch letter to the boutique hotel, just in case this went deeper than I thought. Then I drafted an email to my attorney. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But I attached the folder, and I saved the draft with a subject line that read, "Contingency, just in case they try me." I closed the laptop, locked the drawer, and sat quietly for a moment. No tears, no sighs, just one sentence whispered into the dark. Not this time. The next morning, I left the house earlier than usual, needing the cool air more than I needed breakfast. I grabbed a coffee from the drive-thru, pulled into a side lot near the studio, and dialed Mom. It rang longer than I expected, long enough to consider hanging up. When she finally answered, her tone was already sharp. "Arlena, it's early. Is everything okay?" "No," I said plainly. "I saw the trip itinerary, the real one, and the receipts. You used my name, you excluded me, and now there's almost $4,000 charged to my business account." There was a pause. Not silence, just the kind of stillness where you know someone's debating whether to lie or double down. "Oh, honey," she started. That word felt like a slap. "You always overreact. It's just a vacation. You know how tense things get when you're involved. We thought maybe it'd be smoother if you took a break this year." "You thought it would be smoother if I paid and stayed home? You're making this so much bigger than it is," she snapped. "And by the way, Larice offered to reimburse part of the hotel once she gets her bonus next month. We just didn't want you spiraling again. You always complicate things." That line sliced through me, not because it was new, because it was rehearsed. "So what?" I asked, voice steady. "You just went ahead and wrote me out of my own plans?" Another pause. Then a quiet rustle, like she was shuffling through papers. "I can send you something, a document that shows you're not attending. That way, everyone's on the same page." My inbox dinged before the call even ended. An email from Velma, subject line, "Final trip head count, confirmed 5-2. Attached was a PDF with everyone's name listed neatly. Hotel rooms, flights, dinner reservations. Mine was nowhere. I didn't yell, didn't cry. Just whispered, "You do realize this is fraud, right?" Velma's voice hardened. "Your family, Arlena. Don't threaten us." I ended the call. By the time I pulled into the parking lot behind my office, another notification blinked across my phone. 3 charges, back to back. $1,700. Air France business class, Portland to Paris. $860. Spa Jardin, advanced massage booking for 2. $820. Chateau dinner tasting, prepaid. All billed to the card I'd used to secure the original discount. I stared at the screen, jaw tight. Not because of the amount, because of the message. You don't matter, but your resources do. I stepped into the studio and dropped my keys on the console. Booted my computer. Pulled up the dashboard again, checked timestamps, collected screenshots. No more silence. As dusk settled outside, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open and my hands calm. I typed slowly, deliberately. Subject: unauthorized use, cancellation imminent. 2. Travel coordinator, CC, legal counsel. This email serves as formal notice of unauthorized use of Birch and Pine Design Studios' corporate accounts and travel arrangements. All bookings associated with Group ID Monroe Family Euro 2024 are to be suspended pending review. I changed my signature for the first time in years. Arlena Monroe, founder, Birch and Pine Design Studio. Then I hit send. No dramatics, no final warning, just execution. I closed the laptop, walked out onto the porch barefoot. The sky was purple with the last light of day, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the distant hum of a lawnmower and someone's dog barking 2 streets over. For once, I didn't carry my phone with me. For once, I didn't care what they replied, because I wasn't waiting anymore. I woke up to the sound of a chime, soft and persistent. My phone, left on the kitchen counter overnight, had stacked 3 new messages by the time I reached for my coffee. Sunday sunlight spilled across the floor, warm and golden, but my chest tightened even before I read the first word. Larice again. Hey, random favor. Can you cover the villa deposit just for now? It's due this morning, and Mom's card got flagged again. We'll totally Venmo you by next week. Next week. Just like last time. And the time before that. I sat down on the patio steps with my coffee in one hand and the phone in the other, rereading the thread. Every message from them in the past 2 months had started the same way. Casual, breezy, and followed by a money request. Not one said thank you. Not one asked how I was. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, I pulled up the message history with Velma. Her tone from Friday still echoed like old water pipes. You always complicate things. Maybe I did. Maybe I complicated the narrative that they were so used to. I pay. They forget. I forgive. Repeat. Well, not this time. I walked back into my home office, opened a new document, and began typing line by line. Invoice. Reconciliation required before June 10th. Villa rental deposit. Pending. Question $500. Hotel reservation overages. Unrefunded. $2,300. Group flights. $1,600. Spa and dinner pre-charges. $860. Booking fees and admin time. $250 total due. $6,005. I saved it as a PDF and attached it to a brief email. Hi, please find the itemized invoice for all charges currently linked to my personal and business accounts related to the trip. Kindly settle the balance before June 10th to avoid escalation. Best, Arlena Monroe. I hit send. I didn't even close the laptop before the reply came in. From Velma, 1 emoji. A laughing face, then a line beneath it. Oh, come on, you always handled these things. Don't get petty now. Petty. Petty for wanting back the money I fronted for a vacation I was deliberately removed from. I stared at the screen. A flash of heat swelled through my chest. Not rage, just a kind of exhausted disbelief that someone could be so unapologetically smug. So entitled. I took a screenshot of the message and filed it under Trip Fraud Legal. Then I forwarded it to my attorney with a brief note. Add this to the folder. No explanation needed. That evening, as twilight stretched across the windows and the world got quiet again, I opened my dashboard for the travel agency. There, on the right side of the screen, were all the trip elements I had booked. Flights, confirmed, hotels, reserved, tours, paid, all under my name, all still active. I clicked each item one by one and hit cancel. Confirmation emails pinged one after the other, soft as raindrops. Refund requests processed. Group codes disabled. Primary contact removed. I refreshed the dashboard. A single line appeared in bold gray. All bookings canceled. I leaned back, closed the screen, and just breathed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt even. I had taken back what was mine, without begging, without yelling, without making a scene. They'd feel it soon enough, not through words, but through the silence of their plans collapsing. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Larice. I let it sit there. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, poured a fresh cup of coffee, stepped outside, and let the morning take me. And I said it aloud. Not to anyone in particular, just the sky above. I hope they packed light. By Monday morning, I had already forgotten to check my phone again. That silence, that distance, wasn't intentional at first. It just felt good. The kind of good that doesn't need permission or performance. I let the air move through the open window, listened to the sprinklers kick on outside, and watched the shadows shift on the floor while I sipped my coffee. I didn't need to imagine what was happening in Los Angeles. They were already at the airport. It wasn't until 6:03 a.m. that Naomi's message popped up. "Girl, I think your mom's about to throw her shoe at someone." I blinked. Then came the photo, blurry but unmistakable. Velma, mid-sentence, heels in one hand, gesturing wildly in front of a check-in counter. Larice stood beside her with a phone pressed to her ear, face beet red. A second message followed. The airline turned them away, said there were no active bookings. Concierge said the names were in the system last week, but the payment link got disconnected yesterday. I put the mug down, smiling just slightly. No anger, no gloating. Just satisfaction that the truth eventually catches up, even in terminals full of strangers. At 4:45 a.m., I imagined they walked in expecting warm towels and champagne in the lounge. Instead, they got a blank stare and a screen flashing. No active bookings. Of course, everything had been tied to my account. My payment codes, my agency partnerships, the corporate perks I used to secure their luxury experience. And now, all of it gone. I scrolled back to Naomi's photo. She had circled Velma's shoes in a crude red markup. "Never seen your mom barefoot in public. This is historic." Then came the third message, less playful. "Some people are saying you sabotaged the trip. Group text is blowing up. Someone even said you've always been jealous of Larice." I didn't blink. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my secure folder and added screenshots of each text thread Naomi forwarded. Every accusation, every whisper behind my back. I renamed the folder, just slightly. Forecourt, if needed. Because if it came to that, if they spun this story far enough to cost me work or reputation, I wouldn't argue. I'd just present the receipts. And I had plenty. By noon, mutual friends began posting vague quotes on Instagram stories. The kind that don't say your name, but drip with implication. Real family doesn't make a scene. Some people are just bitter they didn't get chosen. Jealousy is ugly. One even tagged Larice and captioned it. "Paris won't be the same without you." Well, it wouldn't be the same, period. Because there was no Paris trip. Not anymore. By late afternoon, my inbox had 3 more notifications. Failed check-in attempts, auto-canceled spa bookings, flagged charges on the group card, all marked authorization mismatch, declined. I didn't reply, didn't explain, didn't defend. Instead, I opened a new tab. I looked up flights, not for Europe, not for escape, but somewhere just mine. A quiet cabin in Vermont, a lake house in Oregon, a train ride across the Rockies. Nothing fancy, just something that wasn't attached to anyone else's expectations. That evening, as the sky dimmed and the living room filled with warm lamplight, I laid my passport on the counter. Not because I needed it for their plans anymore, but because I had plans of my own. I turned off the TV, slipped into my sweatshirt, and stood by the window for a while. Watching headlights pass. They had planned a trip without me. Now they'd have to survive one. The sky was still trying to decide between gray and gold when I walked into my studio the next morning. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the soft sound of my slippers on the hardwood. I set my coffee down beside the keyboard, opened the blinds halfway, and let the light stretch into the room. Then I opened my laptop. There were no alarms this time, no adrenaline. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. The way you decide to trim back a dead branch, not out of spite, but because it's choking the rest of the tree. I clicked compose. The email wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Subject, final clarification, Velma. Please consider this a clear record of the transactions charged to my accounts over the past 6 months in connection with the European travel plans. All linked reservations have now been canceled. As of this message, I will not be covering any further expenses related to this trip. No further communication is necessary. I wish you well. Arlena, I didn't CC my attorney. I didn't BCC Naomi or anyone else. This wasn't about covering bases anymore. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming peace and doing it without their permission. I hit send. And then I archived it. Then I blocked both of their email addresses. Not out of anger, but because nothing good ever came through those inboxes. I sat still for a moment. One breath. Then another. It was done. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But I knew that voice before she even finished her first sniffle. Velma. The voicemail started with fake softness. Honey, I'm worried about you. Then the switch flipped. You've cursed this family. Do you even hear yourself? You're tearing us apart. You think this makes you strong? You'll regret what you've done. We were a family until you decided to play victim. I didn't delete the voicemail. I saved it. Named it simply, Don't Forget. Because even clarity fades if you let it. The sun was higher now, pouring into the corners of the studio, warming the floor under my feet. I opened a window, letting in the breeze, and leaned back into the chair with my eyes closed. Another buzz. This time, a text from Larice. Mom's not well. This stress is killing her. You need to fix this. That one I did delete. No hesitation. The script hadn't changed, only my part in it had. I'd been cast as the savior so many times, dragged back in with guilt, with illness, with, it's too late now. But none of it was mine to fix. I glanced at the trash folder on my phone, then emptied it. Later that afternoon, I sat on the balcony. The street below was calm, the occasional sound of a lawn blower or passing car rising and falling like ocean waves. In the distance, a boy rode his bike in wide, lazy circles, letting the wind catch his jacket. I thought of my childhood, of the trips where I held all the bags, of birthday dinners where Loris got the candle and I got the check. And I smiled, not with bitterness, but with relief. Some endings don't require explosions, just closed doors that stay closed. I leaned against the railing, watching the shadows stretch across the sidewalk. If they reach for me again, I said softly, they'll only find air. And I meant it. A few days later, while sipping coffee on the couch, I opened my phone out of habit and scrolled through the social media feed I'd mostly ignored for weeks. I hadn't unfollowed anyone, just muted, stepped back. But something still slipped through. A photo from Larice's profile, tagged by a mutual friend. She stood next to a brand new white Lexus, smiling wide with sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Mom was standing beside her, holding a balloon that said, Happy Birthday. The caption read, She's always been my queen. Birthday surprise for the strongest woman I know. We love you forever. There were hundreds of likes. A stream of heart emojis. One comment read, Such a good daughter. I stared at the photo for a full minute. That was the car I had purchased 2 months earlier. Not as a show, not even as a gift, really. Just a quiet decision after Mom's older car broke down during a winter trip to Salem. I'd wired the money directly to the dealership and let them arrange the paperwork. I never asked for recognition, but I also hadn't expected to be erased. Again. I tapped into my email, searched for auto financing proof, found the payment confirmation, and hovered over the file. Then I deleted it. It wasn't out of spite. It was just done. I wasn't keeping tabs anymore. The truth was, if they'd asked nicely, I probably would have still helped. That was always the thing about me. I didn't walk away because of one moment. I walked because they counted on never having to notice any of them. Later that afternoon, my phone lit up again. Velma. Not a message this time. A call. The name stared at me like an old photograph. Familiar. Unchanged. Unmoving. I didn't block it. I didn't answer either. I just let it ring, echoing in the room like a bell I'd outgrown. A few seconds later, the red bubble appeared. Voicemail. I didn't open it. Instead, I pressed and held her contact name, dragged it into a folder labeled History, and set it there, next to my father's number, and the old landline we hadn't used since I was a teenager. Letting go isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet and final. That night, Naomi came over with lemon cookies she claimed were a little burned, but still edible. We sat at my kitchen table, papers and books, and a half-dead succulent scattered between us. I hadn't cleaned up. I didn't feel the need to. She poured tea, I poured wine. We laughed about old jobs, exes, and how she once mistook a coyote for a lost husky and tried to lure it into her car with beef jerky. For the first time in a long while, the laughter wasn't covering anything. It was just there. At one point, she looked at me, really looked, and said, "You seem like you're finished with something." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just not available anymore." Naomi nodded. She understood without needing more. After she left, I stayed up and opened my laptop, not to sort receipts or respond to accusations, but to do something just for me. I typed in travel sites, not luxury ones, just a few modest rentals scattered across Italy. I'd always wanted to see the Amalfi Coast, not through someone else's itinerary, but through my own eyes. I selected a small villa tucked near the cliffs, private terrace, kitchen with old tiled counters, a window facing the sea. Under reservation name, I wrote, Arlena Monroe. No one else. I confirmed the booking. The email pinged in seconds. Your solo journey begins here. I closed the lid, leaned back in the chair, and let the stillness stretch. There would be people who called me cruel, ungrateful. Some had already decided that my silence was an offense. Let them. For years, I had existed on the other end of every call, every problem, every "can you just?" I had held up their peace like scaffolding no one ever looked at. Not anymore. The next day, I packed a bag. Not a dramatic suitcase, just enough for the trip. Passport, a few notebooks, a sweater I loved. I placed my phone on the dresser and turned it face down. At the door, I paused and took one last look around. Not to say goodbye, just to acknowledge this version of me was complete. I didn't burn their bridge, I just stepped off it. Before I close this chapter, let me say something, not as a daughter, not as someone who walked away from a toxic family, but as a woman who finally chose peace over approval. If you've ever felt like your worth was tied to how much you gave, how much you tolerated, or how quiet you stayed, let me be the first to tell you, you can stop. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for walking away from people who refuse to see your value. And you are not broken for feeling tired. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Just step back and let the silence speak for you. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever been the one holding the family together until you couldn't anymore? Or maybe you've walked away but still carry the weight of what-ifs. Tell me below. Share your story. Or simply drop a 1 in the comments if this hit home for you. I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if you didn't enjoy this story, tell me why. I read everything. This space is for you too. And if my voice, or my story, gave you a bit of strength today, hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories to share, ones that speak to the parts of us we don't always say out loud. Let's keep healing. Together. Hi, I'm Arlena. After my mom's funeral, I came home to find my suitcase in the hall and a note that said, "You're not family." No warning, no goodbye, just silence and a locked door. But what hurt more wasn't being kicked out. It was realizing I'd been used all along. The months I spent caring for her, erased, the house I called home, listed for sale behind my back, and that note, it was just the beginning. What else were they hiding? And why was I the one they needed out of the picture? I looked at the note again, folded it carefully, and slid it into my wallet. If they wanted a war, I wouldn't start it, but I sure as hell would finish it. The house still smelled faintly of lemon floor polish, Mom's scent. She liked things clean, polished, in order. But that scent couldn't cover up the rot underneath, not the staleness of silence. Not the chill that settled into my bones as I stood there, surrounded by everything that was once mine, now reduced to 4 battered suitcases and a hallway of judgment. The door had barely closed behind me when I heard the click of a new lock. I turned slowly. No one in sight. No apology. Just the subtle message. I was no longer welcome. I didn't call out, didn't pound the door. I just walked to the porch like a ghost, floating through the remnants of my life. The sky was overcast, hanging low like an accusation. I sat down on the porch swing, careful not to disturb the stillness of a house that was already trying to forget me. The screen door creaked slightly behind me, but no one came out. No one even peeked through the blinds. Mom had been gone less than 24 hours. A week ago, I was helping her sip tea, adjusting pillows under her neck, tracking her medication. I slept on the floor by her bed those last nights, just in case she needed water or comfort or someone to hear her whisper her regrets. Lorana had shown up only once near the end, wearing a silk scarf and crocodile tears. She stayed an hour, took a few selfies with Mom holding her hand, and left with the last bottle of Mom's favorite perfume. Now, she was the queen of this house, while I sat outside it. I glanced down at my phone, battery at 19%. I plugged in the portable charger, thank God I'd remembered to throw that in my tote, and opened the group chat, Vexley Family Matters. Except it wasn't there anymore. Gone. I scrolled again. Still nothing. I clicked on my cousin Maggie's contact and typed quickly, "Hey, did the group chat get deleted?" The reply came back fast. "No, hun. They just made a new one. Vexley Immediate only. I thought you were in it." I stared at the screen. My fingers tingled. I didn't reply. So that was that. They'd cut me out digitally, too. Not even a fake excuse or, "Oh, sorry, must have been a tech glitch." Just gone. Deleted. Like I never existed. I sat there for another hour as the clouds rolled in. It started to drizzle, then rain for real. I didn't move. Didn't feel like I deserved to. By 9 p.m., the cold had crept under my skin and settled in my bones. I stood slowly, picked up my tote, and dragged my suitcases to the car. It took 2 trips. No one offered to help. No one even opened a door to see where I was going. The inside of my car smelled like old receipts and lavender hand lotion. I curled up in the driver's seat, coat pulled tight around me, watching water bead along the windshield. I remembered Mom's voice from just a week ago, raspy, half-conscious. "Promise me. Stay here after Lena. This house should be yours." I had promised, right then, with her hand in mine, and now I was sleeping in my car 2 blocks away from the house I'd spent months tending, like some stray they finally had the nerve to push out after getting what they needed. I woke with a cramp in my neck and a sick taste in my mouth. Morning fog blurred the windows. I wiped a space clean with my sleeve and watched as the lights flicked on inside the house. She was making coffee. She always used Mom's old ceramic French press. I wondered if she even knew how Mom liked her brew. Strong, with a splash of almond milk. Not that it mattered now. She had the kitchen, she had the rooms, she had the damn deed for all I knew. I checked my phone again. 10%. Enough. I opened my email, searched for hospice. Sure enough, the PDF was there, my name on every form, my initials, my contact info, my signature next to every directive. I scrolled to the end, the final line, primary caregiver designation, Arlena Vexley. I stared at those words for a long time, then clicked compose. Subject, legal question, house ownership and caregiving. Body, I'm reaching out to ask about rights related to home occupancy and property when the primary caregiver was not on the deed, but responsible for full-time end-of-life care. Are there grounds for contesting current ownership based on contribution, caregiving, or verbal promise from the deceased? I didn't hit send, not yet, but the cursor blinked at me like a dare. I hit save draft. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It fell in a dull, constant rhythm that matched the pulsing behind my eyes. I parked 2 blocks away from the law office, not because there weren't spaces closer, but because I needed the walk. The steady drizzle gave me just enough cover to feel invisible for a few minutes. The will reading wasn't supposed to include me. That much was obvious. I hadn't received an invitation, no email, no call. But I knew when it was happening. Small towns have big mouths, and someone from the hospice center had mentioned it offhand while handing me a condolence card. I walked in 10 minutes late on purpose. The lobby was hushed, lit with the soft yellow glow of sconces that made everything feel staged. I stepped into the back of the room and sat down quietly, coat damp against the fabric chair. Lorana didn't turn around, but her shoulders stiffened when I entered. She knew I was there. So did the attorney, a man named Dennis Hartley, whose office used to handle my mother's tax filings. He looked up from his papers for half a second, then continued reading without a word. The estate, in its entirety, home, accounts, belongings, is hereby granted to my eldest daughter, Lorana Vexley. I waited for the rest, for my name, for some mention, a clause maybe, anything. There was nothing, just a clean, deliberate erasure. I swallowed the sting in my throat and looked around the room. A few distant relatives nodded politely when the reading ended. Most avoided my eyes altogether. I stayed seated for a moment longer than necessary, watching Lorana accept a small manila folder from Mr. Hartley. She looked like she was picking up dry cleaning. In the hallway, near the exit, was a glass display case filled with decorative items, family photos, keepsakes, things Mom had dropped off years ago when she updated her estate plan. It wasn't meant to be seen by visitors, just stored until needed. That's where I saw it. On Lorana's hand, the ring, oval opal, gold band, slightly worn on one side. Mom used to wear it every day until the swelling in her fingers made it too tight. She'd taken it off in front of me, 3 years ago exactly, and handed it over with a soft smile. "This one's yours," she'd whispered, "because you stayed when it got hard." I stepped closer, voice low. That ring was meant for me. Lorana didn't blink. "She changed her mind," she said smoothly, admiring her hand like she'd just stepped out of a department store catalog. "Said I earned it. Maybe she just didn't want to hurt your feelings." The words were sharp, but her tone was worse, casual, practiced, dismissive. "She was barely conscious," I said. "She couldn't have said that." "You're right, she was slipping. But you know how guilt makes people act. Maybe she realized she'd misjudged me." I stood there, silent, not because I lacked something to say, but because I knew none of it would change a thing. She wasn't interested in truth. She wanted reaction, and I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I turned and walked out, feeling the heat rise up my chest as I crossed the wet sidewalk and climbed into my car. For several minutes, I sat behind the wheel, engine off, hands trembling slightly on my knees. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out my old leather-bound notebook, the one with the bent corner and coffee stain on page 2. I flipped past half-used pages until I found a blank one and started writing. Who signed the official will? Was Mom's journal still in her bedroom? Who witnessed the signature? Hospice staff? Any of them ever speak to Lorana directly? Medical records? Who handled her sedation schedule? It wasn't anger that pushed the pen, not just that. It was clarity. I had spent the last few days trying to believe there had been some kind of misunderstanding, that it was grief, stress, old tension that made them treat me like this. But now, the pattern was too clean, too organized. This wasn't emotional distance. It was a plan. A slow, calculated removal of me from everything that had once defined who I was. I checked the time. 3:42 p.m. outside. The rain had lightened to a mist, but the wind had picked up. A trash can lid rolled down the sidewalk like it was trying to flee the scene. I leaned back against the seat and stared at the ceiling of the car, whispering under my breath. She left me something. I know she did. The thought hung in the air like steam from an open cup. Not proof, but not fantasy either, and I wasn't going to wait for someone else to admit it. I folded the notebook closed, shoved it back into the glove box, and drove off, not toward the motel, not toward the cemetery. I drove toward the house, not to break in, just to look, to remember the layout, to imagine where she might have hidden something. The old wooden box, her journals, something taped under the drawer, because whatever truth was left, it wasn't going to come to me. I was going to have to go find it. I parked one street over from the house, cutting the headlights before pulling into a side lot near a hedge of overgrown laurel. The same lot I used when I didn't want Mom to see my car during the hospice days. Some habits linger. The sun hadn't broken through, but the rain had stopped. The air was heavy, dense with that mossy wetness unique to Oregon spring. I pulled my hood over my head, walked the sidewalk slowly, and rang the doorbell with a firmness that surprised even me. Lorana wasn't home. I'd made sure of that by checking her social post earlier. Lunch meeting in Springfield. Monday, it said, next to a half-filtered photo of a salad she wouldn't finish. Instead, it was her husband, Evan, who opened the door. He looked caught off guard, holding a coffee mug and half-dressed in weekend sweats. Arlena. Hi, I just need 10 minutes to grab the rest of my stuff, I said evenly, not asking permission. He blinked, then stepped aside. Sure, she's not, just be quick. I nodded and walked past him, avoiding the corners where our family photos used to hang. They were gone now, replaced by bland art prints and a set of minimalist coat hooks. Upstairs, I moved directly to my old bedroom, the one I'd taken over when Mom got too weak to sleep alone. The sheets were gone. The air smelled like citrus cleaner and paint. They were erasing me even faster than I thought. I went to the bed first, kneeling down and checking underneath. Nothing. Just a pair of Lorana's storage bins labeled Christmas linens and out of season. No sign of the old wooden box that Mom used to keep under there. The one she swore held nothing important, which meant it probably held everything. I stood slowly, brushing dust from my jeans, and opened the closet. A few wire hangers. One box labeled keepsakes. Most of it was hers. Yearbooks, a wine-stained bridesmaid dress, but in the back drawer of the built-in shelf, tucked flat under a stack of holiday cards, I felt the edge of something taped down. A manila folder. I peeled it free. Inside, folded twice, was a sheet of lined paper. Her handwriting, uneven, delicate, looped across the top. To be considered if anything changes. Below that, a handwritten will, dated 6 months ago. It wasn't notarized, but it was unmistakable. She had named both daughters as co-owners, split the estate evenly, and in the middle, scrawled in darker ink, was one paragraph that hit me harder than any legal phrasing ever could. I want Arlena to remain here if she chooses. Her sacrifices during my illness were without complaint and should be honored. I sat down right there on the carpet, read it once, then again, then a third time. My throat tightened. Not because it changed everything, but because it proved I hadn't imagined the closeness between us. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lying. I was loved. It was never about the house. It was about being remembered for who I really was. I pulled my phone from my jacket and took a photo. Then I folded the paper neatly, placed it inside my inner pocket, and stood. As I came down the stairs, Evan was still in the kitchen on a call. He barely looked up. Thanks, I said, and let myself out. The wind had picked up. Clouds still hung low, but the street felt brighter, lighter. I walked back to my car, unlocked the door, and just as I was about to climb in, I heard someone call out, Arlena? I turned. Across the street stood Mrs. Cleary, our neighbor from 3 doors down. She wore a long beige coat and held a plastic grocery bag in each hand. Her hair was tucked into a knitted beret, and her eyes squinted like she hadn't spoken to me in years. I was hoping I'd see you, she said, stepping closer. I didn't think you still lived here. Barely, she replied, with a short laugh. Listen, I know it's not my place, but your mother, she didn't want to sign that will. I was here the night Lorana and Evan came over with that notary guy. She was upset, said she needed more time. I remember her exact words. Don't make me do this. I felt something tighten around my ribcage. I'm sorry, she added quickly. I should have said something sooner, but it's not easy, you know? They made me feel like I'd imagined it. You didn't, I said. My voice was steady, maybe steadier than it had been in days. You didn't imagine anything. She nodded, her lip trembling slightly. If anyone asks, I'll tell them what I saw. I thanked her, not with words, but with a look I hoped said everything. Then I got in my car and shut the door gently. The sun was dipping low now, casting a gold line across the dashboard. That night, I didn't sleep in the car. I found a small Airbnb 5 miles out. Cheap, quiet, clean enough. I made tea in the microwave, sat cross-legged on the bed, and stared at the folder I'd brought with me. I'd read the will again. I'd replayed Mrs. Cleary's words at least a dozen times. And then I picked up the phone. I called the number from the legal firm Mom had used years ago. A man answered, professional and calm. Calver Law, this is Derek. I cleared my throat. Hi, my name is Arlena Vexley. I need to speak with attorney Derek Calver. You're speaking to him, he replied. How can I help? It's about a will, I said, pressing my palm flat to the bedspread, and a house I was erased from. There was silence, then. Go ahead. I didn't tell him everything, not yet, but I told him enough. The will I found, the caregiving, the neighbor, the feeling in my gut that none of this was an accident. He didn't make promises, but he listened. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was really hearing me. I hung up the call and sat still for a long minute, feeling the faint hum of the fridge in the little studio apartment above the garage. It wasn't much, a bed, a sink, a hot plate, but it was quiet, and it was mine. The soft knock of rain on the skylight had become familiar now, a kind of dull white noise that let me think. Later that evening, Derek called back. His voice was sharper now, clipped in that way lawyers get when something doesn't sit right. We need to meet, he said. That document you found, it's enough to raise some serious questions. Coercion, undue influence, maybe even fraud. If we can show that your mother was pressured, there's precedent. What does that mean for me? I asked, sitting at the small folding table I used as a desk. It means the current will might not be the one that stands, he said, if we act fast. He paused before adding, but you should see this first. He sent a link to my email, a real estate listing. There it was, Mom's house, the house I cooked in, cleaned, cried in, listed publicly like a piece of used furniture. Cleaned out for quick turnover, it read, perfect for investors, owner managed, private showings available by request. Contact Lorana Vexley. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My name wasn't there, not in the listing, not on the deed, not even in the legal narrative anymore. But Lorana's name was in bold. She had wasted no time turning grief into business. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stood, grabbed my jacket, and left. I didn't tell Derek I was heading there. I didn't need a plan. I just needed to look again, to see how much of me had been erased. The street was quiet when I pulled up, the sun setting behind clouds that looked like soaked cotton. I parked a few houses down, took a slow breath, and walked up to the front steps. The door opened before I could knock. Evan. He blinked in surprise. Hey. I'm just here to pick up the rest of my stuff, I said. He opened the door wider and stepped aside. She's not home. I figured. I went straight to the living room. The wall where our family photos used to hang was empty. Just tiny nails and sun-bleached outlines remained. There had been a picture there, a candid one of me and Mom in the backyard, planting tulips. Her laugh was caught mid-motion. It was her favorite, gone. The bookshelf next to it had been stripped bare. Only Lorana's wedding photo remained, next to a vase with silk orchids. In the hallway, the linen closet had been reorganized. No sign of the quilt my grandmother made. No trace of the perfume Mom used to keep tucked behind the towels. I opened drawer after drawer, cupboard after cupboard, like I was searching for a ghost. Upstairs, in what used to be Mom's room, I stood at the doorway and didn't step in. It didn't feel right. Not anymore. I walked back down, quietly. Evan was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. You find what you needed? No, I said. I didn't. He didn't ask for details. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and texted Derek. Me. Do you still need receipts? Derek. Everything. Every note, every text, every invoice from when you were living there. Hospice emails, utilities, anything with your name. I hesitated, then typed. Me. I'll get it to you tonight. He replied instantly. Derek. Good. If they want to sell that house, they'll have to drag you through a courtroom first. I didn't smile. Not really. But the pressure in my chest shifted. It wasn't gone, but it had shape now, direction. For months I had let grief hold the pen. Let silence write the ending. Not anymore. I went back to the apartment, made coffee, and pulled out a plastic folder I hadn't touched in weeks. It had everything. My leave of absence form from work, the hospice intake packet, receipts from prescription pickups, screenshots of conversations with Mom. I organized them one by one, printed extras, scanned what I could, labeled folders. At 1 in the morning, I uploaded it all to a shared drive and sent the link to Derek with a single line. Attached are all materials related to Arlena Vexley's care of Marlene Vexley, deceased. Then I sat back, stared at the wall, and whispered to no one, "If you think I'm just going to fade out, you really don't know me." The morning after I sent Derek the documents, I got a text from Lorana, just 4 words. "Coffee? 1 o'clock. Maze." Maze Cafe was neutral ground. Downtown, always busy, impossible to make a scene in without getting side-eyed by strangers sipping oat milk lattes. I stared at her message, then typed, then deleted, then typed again. "See you there." The weather had turned that kind of chilly, where the wind doesn't scream. It just whispers threats you can't ignore. I wore a navy jacket and brought my leather-bound receipt folder. No frills, no excess, just the facts. She was already there when I arrived, perched at the corner table like she owned the building. Designer sunglasses on the table, chai tea untouched. She didn't get up when I walked in, just looked me up and down and said, "You look tired." I sat. "I've been busy." She didn't blink. I figured. There was a pause long enough for the waitress to bring water and disappear again. Then Lorana leaned forward and got to the point. "She gave it all to me," she said, voice like ice. "Because you were always the helper, not the heir." I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I let it hang between us like the stench of something rotten. When I finally spoke, my voice was even. She also told me weeks before she passed that she didn't want a single thing sold without my say-so. "She was sick," Lorana said with a shrug. "She said a lot of things near the end. And yet she remembered to leave you the house, the ring, and apparently my place at the table." She smiled. "Because I earned it." "That's not what hospice said when they billed me for everything," I replied, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the folder, unzipped it, and slid a copy of the hospice summary across the table. Every invoice came to me, every payment cleared from my account. She glanced at it, barely, then rolled her eyes. "So what? You wanted a trophy for being the good daughter?" "No," I said. "I wanted my name not erased from the life I helped hold together." Lorana leaned back, folding her arms. "This is just about guilt. You were always soft, always trying to fix things." "You think it's weakness to care?" I asked. "That's why you never noticed when people started backing away from you." She tilted her head. "People like who?" "The ones who saw you pressure her, the ones who heard her cry after your visits. You pushed her, and now you're pushing me." Silence. I kept my gaze steady. "If you go through with selling the house, I'll take everything, documents, receipts, statements, witnesses, and hand it straight to the probate judge." "You think a folder of bills is going to stop this?" "No," I said, "but it'll slow it down. And when people start asking why the will changed 6 months before she died, why the power of attorney transferred with no doctor's letter, you'll be the one answering." Her fingers tightened around the ceramic mug. "You're unbelievable." "On the contrary," I said. "I'm exactly what you believed I wasn't." I stood. "If you touch one more thing that belonged to her, I'll bury you in court filings. I've got time. I've got proof. And this time, I'm not staying quiet." I left her sitting there. As I stepped outside, the late afternoon light filtered through thin clouds, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Derek. "You all right?" he asked. "She didn't take it well. She's not going to back off, Arlena." "I know." "Be ready," he said. "They won't fight fair." I walked to my car, unlocking it with the remote. They never did. That night I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry either. I went through Mom's old emails, cross-checked dates, flagged names I recognized. I built a spreadsheet. I labeled every PDF, and sometime around midnight, I whispered the phrase I'd been avoiding for weeks. She didn't get to rewrite the ending. By 7 the next morning, I was already at the co-op down the street, grabbing almond milk and a few things to keep me going through the long days ahead. I hadn't eaten much lately, but I figured if I could get something warm into my system, maybe I'd stop waking up with my jaw clenched. I barely made it past the bulk bins before I caught it, the hush of two voices falling quiet the second I passed. The way one woman tilted her head, just slightly, like I was some sad story she couldn't look away from. A man by the cafe register gave me the kind of tight smile people reserve for the unstable or the recently widowed. Except I wasn't either. I tried to shake it off until I heard someone softly call my name. I turned. It was Janine, a woman who used to live 2 doors down from Mom. She looked like she didn't want to be seen talking to me. Can I just say something?" she whispered. "Sure. I heard from someone who heard from your sister. She's been saying things, like maybe you weren't well, that you had some kind of episode during your mom's care, that you weren't handling things, mentally." It landed like ice water down my back. "She's saying I was unstable?" Janine looked away. I didn't believe it, but others might. I nodded. "Thanks for telling me." I left my card in the aisle and walked straight out. By the time I got home, I'd missed a call from my landlord. I returned it while still standing in the entryway. "Arlena," he said, voice overly polite. "Someone reached out anonymously expressing concern about your emotional state. Said you might not be safe to live alone." I could hear the hesitation in his tone, the legal tiptoeing. He didn't believe it either, but he didn't want it on his hands if something went wrong. "I'm fine," I said, "and I have documentation to prove it if it ever comes to that." "That's not necessary, I'm sure. Just letting you know." "Right, thanks." I hung up and sat down hard on the edge of the couch. For the first time since this all started, I didn't feel hurt. I felt insulted. If Lorana couldn't beat me with lawyers, she'd try to chip away at how people saw me. Make me into a fragile figure, someone to be pitied, or worse, ignored. I pulled out my phone. "Document everything," Derek had said. "From now on, assume anything can be used against you." I created a folder labeled Discredit Campaign and started logging timestamps, messages, names. By late morning, I couldn't sit still, so I drove across town to the small clinic where Mom used to get her labs done. The receptionist had changed, but the nurse hadn't. She saw me, and her mouth fell open. "Arlena?" I gave her a soft smile. "I was in the area." We chatted for a few minutes, small talk, cautious. Then, just as I was about to leave, she glanced around the waiting area, lowered her voice and said, "Your mom." Near the end, she told me something, that she felt cornered, regretted signing things she didn't understand. She looked scared, not sick. I stared at her. She said, "I wish Arlena were in the room." That's the part that stuck with me. I managed a thank you, got in my car, and sat behind the wheel until my knuckles stopped shaking. When I got back to the apartment, I boiled water for tea and sat at the table with my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened a blank document and titled it, "Formal Challenge to Estate Administration, Potential Fraud and Defamation, ICC'd Derek, the real estate firm, and the county probate court." Attached the folder of receipts, screenshots, and now, a statement with my landlord's voicemail transcribed and the nurse's name listed under Supporting Witnesses. My hands didn't tremble. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone, poured the tea, and finally, let my body rest. That night, for the first time since the funeral, I slept through the night without waking. I woke to the sound of soft rain tapping the windows and the faint hum of tires passing on the wet street below. There was something oddly peaceful about it, like the universe was giving me just one moment of calm before asking me to rise again. I stretched, stood, and shuffled to the mailbox unit just outside the apartment. Mostly flyers and circulars, nothing urgent, until I saw it. A small padded envelope, no return address, light as air. I opened it right there on the porch, hands already bracing for something unexpected. Inside, a USB drive, black, unmarked, no note. I brought it inside, locked the door behind me, and plugged it into my laptop with the same caution one might use to handle a ticking box. One file. Victor Confession, March 2019. I clicked play. It opened with a shaky camera view, like someone had propped up a phone on a stack of books. Victor's face appeared, older than I remembered, stubble creeping across his jaw, eyes darting as if someone might burst in on him mid-sentence. He leaned in. "If you're watching this," I guess she finally crossed the line. He took a deep breath, then another. I didn't know what she was planning at first. She told me her mom wasn't thinking straight and that Arlena, he said my name with a kind of guilty reverence, was going to take advantage of the situation. I believed her, I did. But then I was there. When she told Marlene she had to update the will, said it was just paperwork, routine. But she didn't let her read the whole thing. He looked away from the camera, voice quieter now. She made it sound like Arlena was going to force her way into the deed, that she was emotionally unstable. She even said, "We just need Mom to sign it before Arlena tries anything crazy." That was the exact line, and I went along with it, until I couldn't anymore. He sighed and looked directly into the lens again. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have done more." The video ended. No flashy conclusion, no signature. Just a silent black screen and the weight of what I just heard settling like stone in my chest. There was more on the drive. A scan of a letter, tucked in a subfolder titled simply, "For Arlena." I clicked. My mother's handwriting filled the screen, slanted, careful, warm. "To my Arlena, if this finds you too late, I'm sorry. I tried to make it right, but I didn't know how to protect you from your sister without setting fire to everything. I wanted peace in my last months, even if it meant sacrificing clarity. That was my mistake. You were always the one who showed up. I didn't say it enough, but I saw you. I felt your care every single day. I hope you carry that knowledge like armor. Forgive me for being silent. It wasn't because you were wrong. It was because I was afraid. Love. Always. Mom." I sat back, tears prickling but not falling. There was no shock, not anymore. Just a slow, humming validation. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't imagining things. And my mother hadn't forgotten me, she'd just been cornered. I printed the letter, slid it into a folder, and added it to the growing pile I was assembling for Derek. With it went Victor's video, the hospice records, every invoice, and now, witness accounts that could dismantle everything Lorana had tried to build. The next afternoon, I met Derek at his office. He flipped through the papers, pausing at the letter, then replayed Victor's video twice. The second time, he didn't even blink. When the screen went dark, he exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. "This isn't just a probate case anymore," he said. "This borders on fraud, maybe even coercion." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. My silence was no longer passive, it was tactical. I'd spent weeks defending my grief, justifying my presence, proving my love. Now, for the first time, I wasn't pleading. I was building a case, quietly, strategically, brick by brick. We set a date for the formal filing. I went home and rewrote my witness list, added timestamps, organized statements. The same rain from earlier hadn't let up, but it felt different now. It wasn't drumming like a warning. It was steady, like a beat I could follow. The rain let up the next morning, but the clouds still pressed low like the sky hadn't decided whether it wanted to cry again or just hang there and brood. I dressed in a soft gray blouse, the one Mom always said made me look composed no matter what, and drove to the courthouse with a folder tucked tightly against my ribs. Derek met me in the lot. He didn't offer a speech, just nodded, eyes sharp behind his glasses. We walked in together up 2 flights and handed over the paperwork at 9:42 a.m. By noon, Lorana was officially served. Right at her desk in the bank's mortgage division. I didn't see it happen, but I imagined her signature stiffen, her eyes scanning the envelope with the kind of dread you can't rehearse away. I didn't need to witness it. The point wasn't her reaction. It was the fact that she'd finally been forced to face something she couldn't rewrite. Derek's voice cut through the quiet tension of the filing room. "We included the 2018 statement of intent from your mother, the one about you being added to the deed." I nodded. "Twist the knife, politely." He smirked at that but said nothing more. We both knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It never had been. That afternoon, a mediation request came through her attorney. A conference room downtown, sterile and hollow, with a pitcher of lemon water in the center of the table like it could absorb the tension for us. She walked in late. Lorana had always been glamorous in a curated sort of way, but now the polish looked cracked. Foundation couldn't hide the dark circles or the way her hands fidgeted with the clasp on her purse. "Let's not drag this through court," she said without a greeting. I laid the folder flat between us and opened it. First, the printed letter from Mom. "If this finds you too late, know that I tried." Next, a still from the video, Victor's face frozen in mid-confession. Then the nurse's statement, signed and notarized. She skimmed each page with a flick of her eyes. No denial, just silence, and a tightening jaw. "This doesn't prove coercion," her lawyer offered. "No," Derek replied, "but it proves there's enough reasonable doubt to justify halting the sale, and that opens the door to full discovery." I leaned in, resting my elbows gently on the table. "I don't want her car. I don't want the dishes. I don't even want the ring. But I want that house, and I want your silence after." Lorana gave a soft laugh, the kind that tried to land as superior but came out frayed. "You want to live in that sad little box forever? Fine. Buy it back." I looked her in the eye. "I'll pay the remaining mortgage, not a cent more. You took enough." Her lawyer whispered something, but she waved him off. Then, without looking at me again, she nodded. The agreement was written up on the spot. I would assume the final balance on the house loan. She would relinquish all claims to the property. A clause was added. Neither party would disparage the other in any future legal, professional, or personal setting. She signed with her usual dramatic swoop. I signed with a hand that didn't shake. When it was over, she stood, gathered her things, and walked out without a word. I didn't follow. I waited a full minute after the door shut before I exhaled. Derek placed a copy of the agreement in a manila envelope and slid it toward me. "It's done." No confetti fell, no choir sang, just the quiet weight of justice being restored, not as revenge, but as repair. That evening, I returned to the house. My house. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I stepped inside, the walls bare but breathing. The living room still held the smell of lavender oil, the one Mom used to rub on her wrists before bed. I sat on the floor, knees tucked under me, in the center of the empty room. No noise, no echo of voices trying to cut me down. It wasn't the joy I'd expected. It was quieter than that, softer. Closure rarely arrives with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the form of stillness. Sometimes it's just the click of a lock that finally opens instead of shutting you out. I stayed there for hours, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I had, at last, chosen to stay. I woke early the next morning, not out of restlessness, but because the quiet felt earned. The sun broke gently through the clouds, not blazing, just enough to make the dew on the lawn shimmer like something sacred. I slipped on an old flannel, grabbed the box of bulbs I'd bought weeks ago, and stepped barefoot onto the backyard patio. The soil was still soft from the recent rain, and as I knelt with the trowel, something in me clicked, like a loose hinge finally falling into place. "The ground feels different when it's yours," I whispered. With each tulip bulb I placed into the earth, I remembered her. Not the version of her caught in hospital gowns or hospice whispers, but the woman who wore straw hats and once told me, "Anything planted with care will bloom stronger, even people." Somewhere between the third and fourth row, I lost count. It didn't matter. I wasn't planting numbers. I was planting permanence. Around mid-morning, I heard soft footsteps on gravel. I stood, brushing dirt from my palms. Emma was at the gate. She was taller now, with the awkward grace of adolescence. She held a card in one hand, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi," she said. "Mom says I shouldn't be here, but I missed you." I opened the gate without a word, just a smile, and let her in. We didn't talk much. She followed me inside, sat at the kitchen table while I made cocoa for both of us. I didn't ask about Lorana, and she didn't offer. That silence for once felt mutual, like we both knew not everything needed naming. After a half hour, she stood to leave and handed me the card. "It's nothing big," she mumbled. "Just something I drew." She waved from the edge of the driveway and walked off, her figure getting smaller with each step. Inside, I opened the envelope. A drawing, crayon tulips, bright reds, purples, yellows. Above them, a wobbly script, "Grandma's flowers for you." I placed it beside my coffee mug and stared at it for a long time, longer than I meant to. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was warmth. And maybe, right now, that was enough. Later that afternoon, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I paused when I got to Lorana's name. I hovered my finger over it, thought about what I'd say, but there was no speech left in me. No rage, no ache, just silence. I tapped edit, then delete contact. It didn't feel like closing a door. It felt like walking away from one that had been nailed shut for years. That evening, I rearranged a few things in the living room. Nothing dramatic, just subtle shifts. I replaced the generic wall calendar with the photo of Mom and me in the garden, taken the summer I turned 23. She was mid-laugh, hands covered in soil, hair pinned up with a clothespin. Beside it, I framed the letter she'd written, the one that never reached me in time, but somehow arrived exactly when I needed it. If this finds you too late, know that I tried. I just didn't know how to protect you from your sister. I didn't cry reading it again. I didn't need to. Not all wounds require salt or salve. Some just need space, a bit of light, and time. The house was quiet but not hollow. It no longer echoed with absence. It responded now, with creaks in the floorboards, soft light through curtains, the weight of belonging settling into every corner. I stepped outside one last time before bed, just to check on the tulips. The ground had already taken them, covered them, welcomed them, and when spring came, they'd rise, like me, finally grounded, finally mine. Sometimes healing doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like a woman planting tulips in her backyard, not because she has something to prove, but because she finally has a place to call her own. I used to think that justice meant someone saying, "I'm sorry." But now I know better. Justice is showing up for yourself, even when no one else will. It's keeping the receipts, literal and emotional, and knowing your worth, even when others try to erase it. If you're watching this and you've ever been shut out by the very people you showed up for, let me tell you, you're not weak, you're not crazy, you're not too much, you're just around the wrong people. And maybe today is the day you start changing that. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to fight to prove that your love, your effort, or your truth mattered? Or maybe you've had to walk away not because you didn't care, but because staying meant losing yourself. I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, whether you're still in the storm or finally breathing in the quiet after. And hey, if this story moved you even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments or let me know where in the US you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, that's okay too. Tell me why. What would have made it more real for you? And if you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories about strength, family, and finding your voice again, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know, and I'd be honored to have you here for the next story. Until then, stay grounded. You deserve a life that feels like yours. Hello, I'm Ardell. At dinner, my sister threw hot tea in my face because I wouldn't hand her my credit card. But that wasn't the worst part. The truth? She'd been quietly draining my name for years, stealing, lying, even rewriting our mother's will. They cut me out of family photos, out of birthdays, out of the very house I paid for. How did I stay silent so long? And why did no one ever ask what really happened that night? Dinner was supposed to be simple. That's what I kept telling myself on the way over, clutching the homemade salad I'd prepared, the one nobody ever really eats. A courtesy dish, like my presence, like most of what I've done for this family. It was a cool September evening in Columbus, the kind where the sun sets early, but the air still smells like summer trying to hold on. I pulled up to my mother's house, our childhood home, though I've long stopped calling it mine, and parked in the same cracked spot on the driveway I always did. The porch light flickered like it always had. Nothing changes here, not even the parts that should. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with noise, wine glasses clinking, kids shrieking down the hallway, Leora's laugh, loud and performative, carving through the air like it always does when she knows she has an audience. My mother, Velma, sat at the head of the table, regal in her silence, wine glass already half empty. Leora hovered over the table like it was a stage built just for her. "You're late," she said, smiling like a snake. Hope you brought something more useful than that rabbit food. I set the bowl down without a word. Dinner went the way these things usually do. Leora recounting some drama about her assistant messing up a client file. Mom nodding dutifully, the kids tapping at their phones. I picked up my plate, trying to shrink into my chair, trying to stay invisible. But I never could stay invisible around Leora. Not when I refused to play my part. Actually, she said, stabbing her fork into the air like a conductor, I've got a thing at work. Conference in Nashville. You can spot me the hotel. I'll Venmo you when the invoice clears. I blinked. What? You know, just charge it. Your credit card, like always. I shook my head. I can't do that this time. The room stilled a little. The background noise, forks, footsteps, even the fridge's hum, seemed to dull. What do you mean you can't? She said, still smiling, though her eyes sharpened. You're not broke, are you? It's not about that, I said calmly. I just don't want to, she scoffed. You wouldn't even have that card if it weren't for me telling you how to build your credit in the first place. That wasn't true. But truth doesn't matter in my family, not when Leora starts performing. And let's be honest, you're barely using it. You live like a hermit. No man, no kids, no house. What do you need money for? I stood up slowly, trying to hold on to my dignity, like a thread slipping through my fingers. Leora, I said no. And then it happened. She grabbed her mug, one of those oversized ceramic ones still steaming, and flung the contents right into my face. It wasn't a full cup, but it was hot enough. The sting hit my cheekbone, the side of my neck, and soaked the collar of my blouse. My fork dropped. The kids gasped. I didn't scream. I just froze. Silence. My mother, still holding her wine like a prop, barely blinked. Don't upset your sister, she murmured. She's had a long week. I looked around the room. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. My niece, sweet thing, hesitantly passed me a napkin, eyes wide. Her father muttered, It's just tea. Just tea. I blotted my skin, trying not to tremble. It wasn't the burn that hurt. It was the way they all sat there, watching, like this was an uncomfortable commercial break they had to sit through before the program resumed. I excused myself. The ride home was silent. No music, no tears. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the faint hiss of betrayal still ringing in my ears. My neck stung where the tea had landed, but inside? Inside felt worse, because this wasn't new. This was just the first time it left a mark everyone could see. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair pulled back in a bun, the stain on my collar already drying into a memory. I touched my cheek, not sure whether the warmth came from the tea or the humiliation. That's the last time, I whispered. Not a threat, not a vow, just truth. By the time I made it home, the street was quiet, and my neighbor's porch lights had already flicked off. I left my coat on the hook by the door, stepped out of my shoes, and let the silence wrap around me. It was past midnight, but I didn't crawl into bed. I sat on the edge of the couch, lights off, staring into the dim room like it held answers I hadn't earned yet. The next morning, the light from the window slid across my kitchen table. I stood by the sink, letting the water run over my hands longer than necessary. The skin on my cheek was still a soft pink. The memory of last night burned into it like a reminder. Not just of the tea, but of everything before it. That wasn't the first time Leora asked for my card. I'd handed it over more times than I cared to count. Gas for her SUV, a last-minute dress for a fundraiser, a hotel room when she claimed her work expenses needed a backup. She never paid me back. She always said she would, and I never asked. My silence had been my signature, my guilt, my currency. I used to think helping made me good, useful. If I gave enough, maybe I'd finally be seen as something more than the extra chair they never needed at the table. But this time, I said no. And for that, I got burned. It wasn't the physical sting that stuck with me. It was that familiar sinking weight, like I'd violated an unspoken contract, like I'd forgotten my place. I sat down with a cup of coffee I didn't really want and stared out the window. Across the street, the neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel. Normal life happening in parallel to mine, like we were existing on two different channels. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter snapped me out of the fog. A message from Leora. "You need to grow up and stop acting like a victim. You embarrassed Mom." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another version of the same script she'd been reading off for years. I deleted the message without answering. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I stared at the screen for a while before typing the title. Receipts. No plan yet. Just the start of something. Maybe a record, maybe protection, or maybe just proof, for myself, that it wasn't all in my head. As the cursor blinked, my mind drifted to another night I'd buried deep. It was 8 years ago. Dad's retirement dinner. A fancy restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, printed menus, the whole production. Leora organized everything, of course. She picked the venue, the food, the playlist. When I arrived, there was no seat for me at the family table. Leora looked me up and down like I was the help. "Oh, can you just help with drinks? We're running behind." So I did. I poured wine, cleared plates, and avoided the gaze of distant relatives who couldn't quite remember my name. Leora gave a toast that night. She raised her glass and said, "Everything we are is because we show up for each other." Everyone clapped. I stood near the kitchen entrance, out of sight, out of mind. At one point, I whispered to myself, "Maybe next year, I'll be part of it." I never was. Later that same night, I heard her talking to a cousin from New Jersey, loud enough that she wanted me to hear. "I'm the one carrying this family. Ardell just freeloads." I laughed when she said it. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I would have cried. She didn't see me setting up the slide projector. She didn't see me pay for the Uber for Aunt Rosie when her car broke down. She didn't see any of it. And when you're invisible long enough, even you start to forget you exist. Back in the present, the coffee had gone cold. I dumped it in the sink. I grabbed my planner from the side table and opened to a blank page. I started writing down dates, not just the money, the moments. Every time I'd said yes, every time I'd been told to be quiet, every time my mother told me to be the bigger person, which always meant the silent one. This wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was a start. And for once, I wasn't waiting for permission. 3 days passed. Not one message from Mom, not a single check-in from Leora. Not even to justify what she'd done. I wasn't surprised. That kind of silence wasn't new. It was the same silence that followed after every insult they dressed up as concern, every holiday I spent watching from the sidelines. But this time, something had shifted. The old numbness had weight to it, a heaviness I didn't want to carry anymore. I was in the middle of cleaning out old paperwork from a drawer near the front door, mostly junk, expired coupons, bills already paid, when the email came through. Credit alert. Suspicious activity on your account. I paused. At first I thought it might be spam. Then I saw the logo. It was from my actual bank. My breath hitched as I clicked the link and logged in. Overdue payment notices, new credit inquiries, a department store card I didn't recognize, opened 6 months ago under my name. I hadn't opened any new accounts in over 2 years. The address on file? My parents' house? The one Leora still bounced in and out of like it was hers. A knot started forming in my stomach. I called the bank, tried to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. The woman on the line was polite, professional, and efficient. She pulled up my file, confirmed multiple charges, new purchases, a maxed-out card in my name. Then came the bombshell. She had a scanned receipt on file for one of the big-ticket items, a flat-screen TV. She emailed it over. I opened the attachment, and there it was, Leora's handwriting, her swooping L's and dramatic slant. She'd forged my signature, signed for something using my name like it was a costume she could wear whenever it suited her. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the printed receipt trembling in my hand. I didn't even care about the TV. It could have been socks. It could have been dog food. What broke me was the betrayal, the audacity, the fact that she knew I wouldn't check, that she counted on it. I opened my laptop and pulled up the receipts document I'd started just a few days earlier. Line by line, I began typing. Flat screen TV, $1,399. Store card opened without consent 6 months ago. Charges flagged. 5 in total signature. Forged. I paused, then added 2 words in bold, criminal behavior. Then I kept going. Gas for Leora, 5 times. Groceries for Mom, weekly last summer. Dental bill for Mason, $640. Her son, dress for gala, she had to attend, $198. New tires for her SUV. You don't want me driving the kids around on bald tires, do you? $780. All of it came back like pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was building. I hadn't kept receipts back then. I didn't think I needed to. I trusted her. And when I didn't trust her, I trusted my family to notice. To stop her. They never did. Once, when I'd mentioned the money to Mom, just in passing, she waved her hand and said, "Oh, Leora's always been a bit dramatic. Don't keep score. It's family." That was the moment I stopped asking for fairness. I just handed over the card and swallowed whatever pride I had left. But now I opened my journal, flipped to an old entry from last year. Am I being used or just convenient? I stared at the sentence. The ink had faded slightly, but the pain in it hadn't. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper, then closed the journal. No more convenience, no more silence. I drafted an email to the bank's fraud department. Halfway through, I stopped. Something about sending it electronically didn't sit right. Leora was tech-savvy. She knew how to dig through emails, check shared cloud folders, even hack an account if she wanted. I didn't trust that this would stay between me and the bank if I sent it online. So I printed everything. Hard copies, evidence. I stapled them together and slid them into a folder I labeled by hand. Legal. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. But it was a step, a declaration, a private protest against a woman who'd spent decades convincing everyone I was the crazy one, the lazy one, the ungrateful little sister who just needed to try harder. I looked at myself in the mirror across the room. My reflection didn't flinch this time. The pink mark on my cheek from the tea had faded, but something else had taken its place. Something sharper. Not rage, not even sadness. Resolve. She crossed a line, I said out loud, barely recognizing the steadiness in my own voice, a line she couldn't charm her way back over. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight. I remember that because I sat at the kitchen table long enough to hear it taper off, first a drumming, then just a whisper against the window. I'd stayed up organizing the folder I'd labeled legal, but I hadn't touched it since I zipped it into the bottom of my bag. It was strange. For once, I wasn't scrambling to justify my anger. I didn't need to write another journal entry to talk myself down. I just needed sleep. And space. By Wednesday evening, I had both, until my cousin Dana texted me. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Leora's big night." My chest tightened. Big night? What big night? I scrolled through Dana's message again, slower this time, then flipped over to Facebook. The first post on my feed was from Mom. Proud of my firstborn, our rock, our glue, our everything. Join us tonight to celebrate all she does for this family. There was a banner in the photo. I squinted, then clicked. It read, "Appreciation Night for Leora." The picture was taken inside my house, the one I owned, the one I had rented back to the family when I moved into the apartment to regroup. No one had told me. I stared at the post for a full minute. Not a message, not a call, just a banner, just applause. That house still had my name on the deed, my name on the insurance, my name on the loan. But somehow they managed to throw a party there and honor her like she built it brick by brick. I didn't reply to Dana. Instead, I slipped on a jacket, tucked the folder into my shoulder bag, and drove. The house glowed warm against the blue dusk when I pulled up. Cars lined the driveway. Balloons bobbed gently on the porch railing. I parked a block away and walked the last bit on foot. My palms itched. My breath steadied itself, almost too calm. I didn't use the front door. I used my key and entered through the back like I was the help. The smell of catered food wafted from the kitchen. Garlic bread, pasta, those overpriced little meatballs in brown sugar glaze. Laughter echoed from the living room. And there it was. The banner. "Thank you, Leora." Someone had propped framed photos on the mantel. Leora at church events, Leora with her kids, Leora posing in front of a sold sign like she had bought the house. None of me, not a single photo. I scanned them twice, even the photo of Dad's old retirement dinner. My hand was cropped out of the frame. In another, The graduation photo I remember hanging in my old bedroom. Leora wore my sash, the one I'd earned. My name had been whited out. I don't know what I expected. Aunt Rosie stood near the punch bowl, laughing a little too loud. "She's basically the one who bought this place," she said to no one in particular. My mother, leaning beside her, waved her hand in that way she always did when she didn't want to lie, but didn't want to tell the truth either. Well, she's earned it. I walked slowly past them, unnoticed. I didn't say anything. I just filmed. Each banner, each frame, the cake with her name, the guest book someone had left on the coffee table, and the envelope. It sat near the stack of party favors, half tucked under a placemat. My name printed on the upper corner. Property tax notice. Still under my address. My signature, not Leora's. I took it. I slipped it into my bag the same way I'd slid my dignity under my breath for the last 10 years. Quietly, like it didn't matter to anyone but me. I moved through the house like a ghost. I wasn't crying, I wasn't shaking, but something inside me was reshaping. They hadn't just erased me. They replaced me. I paused at the hallway mirror before leaving. Fixed my hair, straightened my collar, smoothed the line of my jaw with the back of my hand. When I stepped out the front door, I did it slowly. Nobody looked up. Nobody asked where I'd come from, and that was fine. I walked to the sidewalk, then to the car, and I smiled. Not the kind you wear for photos, but the kind that slices. That would be the last party they ever threw in my name. I didn't go home right away. I drove past my apartment complex, circled the block twice, and finally pulled into the lot of a diner that stayed open past midnight. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car, the engine off, windows fogging, the quiet too loud to ignore. My hand stayed on the wheel long after I'd parked, as if I needed to feel something solid that hadn't been taken from me yet. Somewhere between the silence and the low hum of a truck passing on the highway, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. Not in the way I used to. Not the sharp, hot kind that wanted to scream or throw something. This was different. Like my body had absorbed every betrayal and now carried it like scar tissue. No longer bleeding, just thick and permanent. By Saturday afternoon, the air had cooled again. Autumn was creeping in without permission, like Leora. The kind of cold that wasn't sharp, but slow and steady. The type that made your bones feel older than they were. I hadn't planned on going to the house again. I only wanted to pick up an old quilt and some mortgage papers I'd filed away in my childhood closet. Simple, in and out, quiet. But the driveway told a different story. Rows of cars, laughter spilling out through cracked windows, a balloon caught in the wind, tugging against the porch railing. I paused at the curb and checked the address, not because I doubted it was mine, but because everything about it felt like a stranger had moved in and hung up new wallpaper. I slipped around the side and used the key. Same lock I'd installed 2 years ago. Same creak in the back door hinge. Different world inside. Streamers, trays of hors d'oeuvres, folding chairs. People I hadn't seen since high school sipping white wine and calling my sister a force. A banner stretched across the living room wall in gold lettering. "Thank you, Leora, for everything you've built." My feet didn't move right away. The words hit like a slap, not because they were loud, but because they were stolen. I'd built this house. I paid the down payment. I negotiated the interest rate. I fixed the leaky pipes, and there they were, toasting her as if she'd laid the foundation herself with her bare hands and a prayer. I stepped inside. No one turned. No one asked how I was. One woman brushed past me to grab a napkin and muttered, "Excuse me," like I was a piece of misplaced furniture. I didn't speak, just walked the hallway toward what used to be my bedroom. On the way, I paused at the wall. It used to be a collection of mismatched frames, vacation photos, family dinners, holiday snapshots. Now it was curated, uniform, sterile, every picture perfectly aligned, perfectly staged, and not one of me. The 4th of July photo, where I held Leora's youngest, replaced with a solo shot of her and the baby. The Thanksgiving table shot where I carved the turkey, gone. In its place, Leora pouring cider beside our mother, both smiling like nothing had ever been broken. In the bathroom, I found another, a printed quote beneath a framed image of Leora in front of the fireplace. The soul of this family. I didn't cry. Instead, I went into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down the quilt. I found the file box and thumbed through until I saw the envelope marked mortgage records. The corner was dog-eared, but it was still intact, still mine. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. I didn't look upset, just done. In the kitchen, I spotted a notepad beside the fridge and a pen that said, Leora for local counsel, on the side. Of course. I tore off a sheet and wrote in small, steady letters. This was never yours. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I left it next to the fruit bowl. On my way out, I passed 2 women by the door. One of them said, she should be grateful, honestly. Leora's done so much for her. They didn't realize I was close enough to hear. I didn't flinch, didn't stop. By the time I reached my car, the only thing I felt was the weight of the envelope in my tote, and the quiet certainty that something had shifted. Not in them, in me. They could crop me out of every photo they liked, but I remembered every frame I used to be in. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I hadn't set an alarm, hadn't meant to rise so early, but my mind was already working before my feet hit the floor. The envelope from the party sat on the kitchen table where I'd left it the night before. I didn't touch it right away. I poured coffee, stared out the window while it brewed, and tried to convince myself that today would be just another day. It wasn't. At 10 a.m., I met Deidre at the attorney's office downtown. She had called me 2 days earlier, hesitating before saying, I think you should see something, and I didn't want to tell you over the phone. The office was cold and clinical, with art prints of abstract landscapes and a receptionist who smiled too brightly. Deidre was already seated, flipping through her phone nervously, and stood as soon as she saw me. I'm sorry, she whispered as we sat down together. I thought you knew. The attorney, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and calm demeanor, greeted us and laid out the paperwork like it was a routine update. This is the latest version of your mother's estate planning, she said, sliding the packet forward. We received instructions and notarized signatures 3 months ago. I didn't need to read the entire document. My eyes scanned directly for what mattered. My name. It wasn't there. Not in the list of beneficiaries. Not in the handwritten notes at the end. Not even a mention in the in case of dispute clause. But Leora's name? It was in bold, twice. Is there a mistake? I asked, though my voice sounded flat, like I already knew the answer. The attorney blinked slowly. I'm afraid not. According to the documentation, your mother was of sound mind and expressed clear intent to revise her previous will. You were listed in the prior draft. This version supersedes it. Deidre leaned in, eyes wet. Leora was at Mom's almost every day that week. I didn't think anything of it, but now, I don't know. I stared at the paper again. My name had once been written there, maybe just as ink, but it had meant something. And now it had been erased, not forgotten, not overlooked, but purposefully removed. I stood before the attorney could finish her next sentence. Thank you, I said tightly. I've heard enough. Deidre followed me to the parking lot, silent until I reached my car. Ardell, if you need anything, if you want to contest, I don't want anything, I cut in. Not from her, not from any of them. That wasn't completely true. I wanted the truth. I wanted the lie exposed. I wanted the record corrected, even if it didn't change the outcome. Back home, I set the legal folder down and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just legal paperwork. It was a rewriting of my life, again, without my consent. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Hello? A pause, then a low voice I hadn't heard in years. Ardell, it's Jonas. I stood up too fast, knocking my glass off the table. It hit the floor but didn't break. Jonas, my college boyfriend, the one that got away, or rather, the one I let go because I thought he had walked away. I know this is unexpected, he continued, but I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. I didn't speak. My silence was permission. Your sister called me senior year, said you were cheating, that you'd had a breakdown and were unstable. I didn't believe her at first. But then, your mom called. She said it would be best for you if I let things go. I sat down. He sighed through the phone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you by staying away, but I never stopped wondering. My voice came back in pieces. Why now? I saw your name in the news, something about that community award you won last year. It made me wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I laughed once, dry. You didn't make the mistake. You just believed the people who said they loved me. There was a beat of silence. Then, I'm sorry, for all of it. We didn't talk much longer. I hung up and sat in the dim light, the phone still in my hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. At dawn, I walked to the local FedEx print center. The clerk looked half asleep, but I was wide awake. I need to make copies, I said, sliding the mortgage records, bank statements, and will revision request across the counter. When I got home, I placed them in a new folder labeled Truth. Then I opened my journal and wrote, "They didn't just steal from me. They built their version of the world on top of mine and told everyone else I was the one lying. But I remember the floor plan. I know which walls are fake." I met my new attorney the next day, requested a full audit, asked her to look into the signature date on the revised will, provided the name of the notary I knew hadn't even been in town that week. Then I asked her to update the property deed, removing my mother's temporary claim and transferring it fully under my control. She nodded. We can begin the process immediately. Before I left her office, I added one more sentence to my journal. This isn't about money. It's about the lie they all agreed to live with. By Sunday morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Not with weather. Columbus was mild that time of year, but with anticipation. The kind that settles over your shoulders when you know the hammer's about to fall. I'd spent the morning cleaning, not out of routine, but restlessness. There was a strange calm that comes from knowing the truth is no longer a secret, and that it now has teeth. I'd just returned from the grocery store, one hand balancing 2 paper bags while the other fumbled for my keys. As I turned the corner onto my block, I heard her before I saw her. "You think you can cut me out like I'm nobody?" Leora, in broad daylight, on my stoop, voice shrill enough to make 2 neighbors shift their blinds and someone across the street freeze mid-sprinkler adjustment. I didn't flinch. I didn't speed up or slow down. I walked straight past her toward the entrance, bags crinkling with every step. "You really think this little power play is gonna stick?" she barked. "You're just mad that for once I'm the one getting credit." I paused at the front door just long enough to meet her eyes. "You did that yourself." The door buzzed open from a tenant who lived upstairs, Mrs. Watkins, sweet but deaf in one ear. She didn't realize she'd just let in a storm. Leora pushed past me before I could stop her, stomping into the hallway like she belonged there. I didn't bother calling her back. Instead, I set the bags down and locked the main door behind us. "Let's not do this here," I said lowly. "People have lives." "Yeah? And what about mine?" she shouted. "You just blindsided me, Ardell. Lawyers? Documents? You're sick." I didn't respond. I walked ahead of her, letting her noise trail behind. It wasn't until we reached my apartment door that her tantrum took an unexpected turn. On the entry table inside my unit sat a small jewelry box, one I hadn't opened in years. I'd found it tucked into an old dresser drawer while looking for tax records the night before. I hadn't even realized what was inside until I opened it again this morning. Now, Leora spotted it instantly. She lunged forward, ripping the box open, her eyes locking onto the bracelet nestled inside. A thin gold band engraved with AM, initials for Ardell Monroe, a gift from our father on my 21st birthday. His last gift, actually. Leora's face drained. "You still have that?" she asked, breath short. "You thought I didn't?" I answered. Her eyes narrowed. "It wasn't even yours anymore. You never wore it." "You gave it to your boyfriend," I said evenly. "You told him it was yours. You let him wear it like a badge while I spent a year wondering if I'd misplaced it. I needed a gift. It's not like it meant anything to you." There it was. The sentence that somehow cheapened everything and yet clarified even more. "It did," I said, "but apparently, so did I, just not to the people I thought mattered." She tried to grab the box. I moved it behind me and walked to the kitchen counter. "This isn't about jewelry," I said. "It's about boundaries, and you burned through every one of mine." I reached into the drawer and pulled out the folder I'd labeled Legal. It wasn't thick, but every page inside carried the weight of years I could never get back. I handed it to her. "What's this?" she hissed. "Read." She opened it, her eyes darting over photocopied bank statements, loan applications, debt recovery notices, all with her signature beside my printed name. "This is fake." "It's filed," I replied. "You can scream all you want, but the notary, the bank logs, the timestamps, they all say otherwise." She slapped the folder shut. "You really think this is going to fix your pathetic life?" "No," I said, reaching to take it back. "But it's going to stop you from wrecking mine." Leora grabbed one of the pages and tried to tear it. Her hands shook. "Go ahead," I said. "Rip it all. It won't matter. The court already has copies. This is just for you." She froze. Then, in a final, desperate act of denial, she threw the folder across the room. Papers fluttered like wounded birds, some landing near the couch, others under the coffee table. I didn't move to pick them up. I just stared. And slowly, I walked to the door, opened it wide. "Leave." She stood there, chest heaving, unsure whether to explode or cry. I said, "Leave, Leora. This is over." She turned without another word. No threat, no apology, no final insult. Just the sound of heels on tile, the brief slam of the outer door, and then silence. I closed my own door. No slamming, no theatrics, just a soft click. In the silence that followed, I knelt and gathered the scattered papers. Each one felt less like a weapon and more like a shield now. By the time the last page was back in the folder, my hands were steady. This wasn't a victory, it was a restoration. The folder sat on my table for 3 days before I did anything with it. I didn't touch it. I didn't open it. I just looked at it sometimes, like it might whisper something back to me. But on the morning of Mom's birthday, I wrapped it. Not in newspaper or packing tape. I took my time. Black satin paper, pressed smooth at the seams, a silver ribbon, no card, no note on the outside. Inside the box, I placed 2 things, a silver photo frame, empty, and the court filings that outlined every debt, every forged signature, every lie that wore my name like a borrowed coat. I added a single sheet of paper, folded once. On it, I had written, "I'm not the daughter you wanted at the table, but I won't fund the lies anymore." Then I called a courier service. Paid extra for express delivery to the restaurant where the family dinner would be held. I didn't even ask who RSVP'd. I didn't need to know. By the time the package arrived, I was back at my apartment, sitting on the couch, staring out the window. I imagined the moment the box was opened, Velma gasping, Leora going pale, maybe Aunt Faye putting a dramatic hand to her chest. I didn't expect a call, but my phone lit up anyway. Cousin Rachel first. "What the hell, Ardell?" I ignored it. Then Uncle Dennis. "This could have been handled better." No reply. Finally, my mother. One-line text. "Why humiliate her like this?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "Because I was humiliated in silence for years and no one asked why." I didn't wait for a response. I powered the phone down and placed it in the drawer next to my old checkbooks and expired coupons. That night, my attorney called. She confirmed Leora hadn't shown up to the initial hearing. No statement, no representative, just an absence. "She's hoping this all goes away," the attorney said. "It won't." "I know," I told her. That night, I didn't sleep much. I got out of bed just after 2 a.m. and brewed coffee I didn't drink. Around 4, I got dressed, packed a small tote with a notebook, pen, and the court calendar printout, and I drove. I didn't go to work. I didn't go to the courthouse. I went to my parents' house, now mostly empty, save for old furniture and dust-covered heirlooms. I parked in the driveway and walked through the back, using the same key I'd had since I was 17. Inside, it was silent. Not cold exactly, but abandoned in a way that didn't feel recent. In the den, my father's old recliner sat just where it always had, angled toward the TV, faded from sunlight. I sat down in it slowly, the leather creaking beneath me like a whisper from the past. I hadn't sat in that chair since before he died. It wasn't sacred, just avoided. Like if I sat in it too long, I'd hear him ask why I was always so sensitive. But this time, I wasn't trying to be anything. Not soft, not quiet, not agreeable. I opened my tote and pulled out the court date notice. Then I lit a small candle I'd brought from home. Vanilla, my father's favorite scent, not that he ever said it. I just remembered the way he lingered in the kitchen whenever Mom baked with it. I stared at the flame and whispered, more to the room than to anyone specific. I didn't break this family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. No one answered. No thunder cracked outside. No ghostly breeze passed through the vents. Just silence. I stayed there a while longer, watching the flame dance, letting memory and hurt and a strange sort of peace mix in the stillness. When the candle burned down to a stub, I blew it out, packed up my things, took one last glance at the recliner, and left. As I stood at the front door, hand on the knob, I felt the full weight of what I'd done, not out of guilt, but release. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't even close it hard. I just let it fall shut with a click. Final, simple, soft. The door closed behind me with a soft sigh, and I stood still for a moment, keys in hand, jacket still buttoned. It was quiet in a way that felt earned. I drove back without turning on the radio. Not out of sadness, but because silence finally sounded like mine. 2 weeks later, I was knee-deep in cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. The Portland air smelled like wet bark and old books, and the apartment above the bookstore creaked every time I moved. But I liked that. It reminded me I was somewhere new, somewhere honest. I'd taken the smallest unit, a studio with a single window that overlooked the alley, a kitchenette that hummed louder than necessary, and a floor heater that clicked like it was thinking. And yet, it felt more like home than the 5-bedroom house I used to walk on eggshells in. I spent a slow Tuesday afternoon organizing my desk drawers when I found it. An old accordion folder labeled Archived Statements. Most of it was mundane: bank letters, expired IDs, a faded library card from college. But one envelope made me pause. It wasn't marked, just a random printout from an old online account. I unfolded the paper and squinted at the line item. A luxury spa resort 2 towns over. Weekend package, champagne, 2 massages, private suite. Billed directly to my card. I remembered that weekend. I'd been out of state, attending a work conference. Leora had told me she couldn't afford gas money that month. She'd texted me some sob story about Mom's prescriptions and how things are tight right now. I set the paper on the table, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't the charge itself that hit me. It was how easily she'd pulled it off. How natural it must have felt. This wasn't new, I said out loud. This was just older than I realized. There was no rising anger, no sudden urge to confront her, just a deep, hollow exhale, like letting out air I'd been holding for too many years. Love, when it's tangled in guilt, makes a lot of excuses. And I'd made every single one of them. I folded the paper, slipped it into a file marked closed, and kept packing. Later that evening, I placed the last few items on the shelf by my small window: a framed copy of my new business license, second shelf, home organizing solutions, a printed quote from Maya Angelou, and the photo of my father's old chair, now long gone. Next to that, I placed the empty silver frame, the same one I sent on Mom's birthday. I didn't plan to fill it. Some spaces were better left blank. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was her again, Velma. No message, just a missed call. This was the 5th one in as many days. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, I opened the letter I'd received earlier in the mail, a formal response from Leora's attorney. Pages of deflection, positioning, justification. No apology, not even the pretense of remorse. I read the entire thing, then carefully folded it and slid it into a folder I'd labeled not evidence or legal, but simply past. I stood up and walked onto the tiny balcony that overlooked the alley and the back door of the bookstore below. The Oregon rain had started to fall, gentle, misty, not in a hurry. I pulled my cardigan tighter around me and sat in the metal chair I'd dragged out there. Peace doesn't always come with trumpets or a grand declaration. Sometimes it's just an unanswered call you no longer feel guilty about. A letter you read without shaking. A memory that stings but doesn't wound. I reached for my journal and wrote one final line. I didn't win. I walked away, and that was everything. I used to think peace came from fixing everything, patching wounds, mending bonds, making sure everyone else was okay. But real peace? It came when I stopped apologizing for protecting myself, when I stopped watering relationships that only drained me. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space I was told I didn't deserve to stand in. About learning that love doesn't mean allowing harm, and silence isn't the same as grace. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom with a backbone. If any part of my journey made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, I'd love to know. What does family loyalty mean to you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own story? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something deep inside you. Or just tell me, where are you watching from? And hey, if you didn't connect with this story, that's okay too. I'd still love to hear why. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you believe in the power of truth, healing, and stories that hit close to home, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Because sometimes, the stories that break us open are the ones that put us back together.